Okay, everyone. We are going to have some fun and I'm going to launch some polls. This is absolutely just much fun because you're going to hear more about these topics later on in this showcase. So go ahead and answer. What is your favorite Jane Austen novel? Okay, we're going to end the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ending the poll. There is actually not a terribly clear winner. Let's look at that there. So a lot of folks are fans of Pride and Prejudice, not really surprising there, but a lot of folks are fans of none of them. Oh, well, we'll hear more about Jane Austen later today. So let's go to the next poll. Just lots of fun. Next question. We are going to hear about Cornwall later. Oh boy, this is looking really good. Please answer. This is just for fun. Okay, so we're going to close in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And I am sad to report that these are the answers. 50% of people said they could not find Cornwall on the map. Well, we're going to learn more about Cornwall later this morning. Okay, having some fun. Let's do another poll here. Have you ever, true or false, you have never been to a yoga class in your life? Answer this honestly. Are people able to see that? Okay, answer this honestly. You have never been to a yoga class in your life. Is that a true statement or a false statement? Oh, it won't take your response. Huh. Yeah, I'm not saying, okay, folks, we're gonna have to, I'm so sorry. Yeah, I'm seeing your messages here that it won't accept your response. Don't know what to say about that. Sorry, folks. Okay. Let's see if we can do this poll because we're still having fun here. Sorry, we're gonna have to skip the yoga question. What about this question? Who invented the Kodak camera? You've got some choices there. We've got a front runner. We do. Okay, and we will end this in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Almost everyone was right. George Eastman invented the Kodak camera. Excellent. We're going to hear more about that later this morning. Okay, folks, we've got a couple more questions, but we are going to get going with the program today, and we are going to save those polls for later. Okay. Okay, so welcome everyone. My name is Laura. And this was my crazy idea to have a showcase for all the virtual presenters that would be very happy to give you some virtual programs for your library, museum, or other organization that you are with. I see some questions here in the chat. We are going to get to them after the main program. But I will answer one right away. Everyone here will get not only a recording of this program, the recording which is going on right now, but you will also get a list of all of the presenters and their contact information, their websites, etc. So you might want to take notes. I understand if you want to get a pad of paper, that's fine. But like I said, you are going to get a recording of all of this. It'll probably be tomorrow morning. So I want to acknowledge the thanks that I'm seeing in the chat. This is, yeah, I didn't think that everyone, so as many people as there are, would be interested in this idea. But in case anyone is so inclined, you can buy me a cup of coffee on my coffee page. That is in the chat. You can do that through PayPal to say a thank you. I have to admit, I am slightly, you know, I do prefer a cup of tea, but that's fine too. Coffee, tea, whatever you want. I hope everyone has their beverage of choice. So I do have to say that I'm very glad to hear that so many people have been accepted by their household cats. So yes, I hope everyone appreciated that question that I asked during the registration, that you're not a bot, you are a human, but your cats do think you're one of them. So that's great. Once again, type your questions into the chat feature. We have a total of 8 presenters today. And a quick word about virtual programs. I do know that actually some of you are new to virtual programs. Just to let you know, I'm actually a library director. I see virtual programs from both sides of this. I not only give virtual presentations, but I also hire people to give virtual presentations, and I do some hosting. So if you are new, if you don't know how things work, if you want some advice, first of all, you're on a call with a wonderful bunch of programmers from libraries, museums, etc. And so just reach out and ask, and someone will be able to help you. You can contact me and I can give you, I can share with you what I have learned. But virtual and hybrid programming, they do offer more advantages than the standard in-person programs. The first of which, I will be perfectly honest, you don't have to pay travel fees for any of these folks to travel to your area. And you can easily share the costs that do incur with hiring a presenter. You can share those costs with another library or another community organization. And of course, you have the ability to obtain speakers from all over the nation, which is why you're here today. If you really want to talk about in-person programming after you've met everyone today, feel free to contact each person directly and have that conversation. But just remember that all the folks that you're going to meet here today, we're from 3 different states, and all of you awesome people are from 22 states, the District of Columbia, and 1 Canadian province. So we're talking about a lot of different locations and such. So virtual really might be the answer. Oh, and I see Robert has been accepted by his household cat. So thank you so much, Robert, for sharing, bringing on the cat with you. Don't feel like you have to choose between the presenters today. We aren't in competition with each other. I'd really like you to consider hosting a series of talks and giving multiple presenters the opportunity to choose between to share their skills and their stories with your patrons. So with that being said, okay, I had a little bit of technology problems before, but I want to share with you my slides, and we are going to really try it this time. Okay, folks. So yes, I admit I'm going to do the talking first. So my name is Laura again, and I am a library director. I give portrayals and illustrated lectures. My contact information is there. We could do virtual programs, either live or pre-recorded. And if you need help posting them, if your organization's Zoom license is either expired or it's being used the same night for like a board meeting, I could host the Zoom program for you for an additional fee. If you really want to talk about in-person programs, we can talk about that too. I portray Mary Todd Lincoln. I have, these are my 3 main programs that I offer as Mary Lincoln. And more information is there on my website, laurafkeys.com. Clips of my programs and additional descriptions of them are available on my website. So please go there and view those things. I portray Laura Ingalls Wilder as well. I've written a total of 6 presentations as Laura, and my slides are going crazy. But here are the 5. I will say that my most recent one, Lessons Learned from the Hard Winter, has direct parallels with being isolated, being unable to connect with your family and friends in person, and how you get through that. And no one will be surprised to hear that I wrote that last winter. Okay, I also portray Elizabeth Cady Stanton. I'm very proud of this portrayal and her call for women's suffrage. I portray Mary Harlan Lincoln, who was the daughter-in-law of Mary Todd Lincoln. And I also portray Irene Adler, the only woman to have outsmarted Sherlock Holmes. I'm actually very proud of that because it's a portrayal, an accurate first-person portrayal of a fictional character. So that's a lot of fun, actually. I have just started to portray Charlotte Bronte, and I offer 2 different programs as her, one set in 1847 and one set in 1854. If you are interested in those presentations, I do actually recommend that you book both of them. If you book both of them within 30 days of each other, I will give you a discount on those. I offer illustrated lectures as well. Again, clips and descriptions of these are available on my website, which you see there. These are lectures in which I use PowerPoint and other images in order to share the story, so I am not portraying anyone during these lectures. I talk about the photograph album that Mary Lincoln kept, and I also talk about the fashion that Laura Ingalls Wilder put into her novels, how accurate it was, and how sometimes it wasn't accurate. I talk about lighthouses. I know we have many folks here on the call from Michigan and other locations that have gorgeous lighthouses. I'm very glad that you're here. So I talk about lighthouses of the Outer Banks and lighthouses of Michigan and the Great Lakes. And those are full of original photographs and lots of history as well. So I'm very proud to tell the story of the Hershey Chocolate Company. This is a story that's very dear to my family, and also the story of the history of color. Just kind of where do the names of colors come from? When were colors invented? Yes, and the colors are invented. That's something that a lot of people don't think about. In the subject of crazy things flying through the air, I talk about both Orson Welles' War of the Worlds broadcast and also Santa Claus. So you see there's a parallel there. If anyone is interested in previewing, watching before you hire me, the history and folklore of Santa Claus, I'm actually giving that tonight. And if you want to log on to Zoom and view that and put something in the chat, or find me through my website, and I'll hook you up with the link for that tonight, but I'm actually giving that talk tonight. And with the Orson Welles' War of the Worlds broadcast, that's something that I've always been interested in. And like I said, I give the lecture talking about what went up to that broadcast. Was there really a nationwide panic? And of course, what happened afterwards. That was my really quick rundown of what I can offer you and your patrons, a variety of different topics. For those of you who are in public libraries and you want to do something that's kind of with your summer reading program theme, just ask, because there's 2 main reading program themes in the nation next year, and we can definitely hook you up with multiple presenters to talk about that theme. So I am done talking. I really am. I talked very quickly. And we are going to hear next from Claire Evans. So Claire, take it away.
Thanks very much, Laura. I'll give you a tiny bit of intro for myself. Do you have an intro you want to read, Laura, or shall I do it?
Yes, I will do it, Claire. I
Well, thank you.
apologize.
That's okay.
Folks,
That's okay.
Folks, I would like to properly introduce Claire Evans. She is a former journalist, attorney, and college lecturer who started her love of most things British as she and her mother watched countless episodes of Are You Being Served?, Faulty Towers, and The Vicar of Dibley on PBS. She went on to study abroad in London and, against all odds, married a Brit she met in Peoria, Illinois. They moved to England, where they lived for a number of years. Now, outside of her work for a legal advice charity, Claire became a student of historical sites, pub dining, British baking, and tea shops. Her business, Tea with Claire, grew from friends asking for travel and relocation advice. So now I'll say, take it away, Claire.
Thank you so much. So I'll add to that, even though I live in the United States now, I'm based in Peoria, Illinois, I still very much feel like I'm under the influence of my UK spouse. So when we moved back, which has been some years ago, I began to work for a travel company. And that was people who were relocating. And that was people in the UK and coming back, what to expect. So I had that experience, and I spun that into little talks at my local library. And in COVID, that became more than little. I was happy to see people were more interested in the UK than I ever thought they would be. So I am up to 9 talks now. I used to try to entertain college students, so hopefully I've latched onto the fact I was that and a former journalist, and I'm interested in everything. So I made a little trailer video, and I will share that with you right now. Who knew the British baking show? I have a custard disaster story. It's very dramatic. That still makes me giggle. So we'll do a magazine tour, like you're flipping through pages. This is my most popular talk, the Great British Baking Tour. And I'm a baker, and I learned the hard way, and I share all my tales of woe in my talks about the learning curve of acclimatizing to Brit society. I give the background of people who are in the show and former personnel and current personnel. Are they known? I talk about ingredients that are particular to the UK, so that you can do the recipe packet that's included and not feel like you're floating. And I also tour, but because it is a tour, and we talk about some of the most lovely places and the baked goods that are known to be from there. And then, particularly for the holidays right now, I'm pretty busy with the holiday edition of this tour, where I focus mostly on the particular holiday foods. I'm also busy with Happy Christmas at Home, how to have a UK holiday. And we do that. We had Christmas pudding made last week and roasted chestnuts a few days ago. One of my librarian patrons says I'm a culinary tour guide. Yes, I'm a foodie. So a lot of what I talk about has to do with tours of dinner, but also quirky things like late night shopping, things particular to the UK. During the summer season, particularly for Harry Potter's birthday, this is a popular one, pottering around the UK, real life locations. So I picked things that people could actually visit, like the Glenfinnan Viaduct. And then if you wanted to see the exterior of Diagon Alley, where to send you in London to do that for exterior shots. But I have a divergent mind, so I also pick apart Hogwarts architecture, and it's actually a mishmash of significantly historical buildings in the UK. So I tell you about those too. So here's the answer to Cornwall. If you've never been to Cornwall, it's beautiful. It's the part of the country in the southwest that juts out like a claw. It's ancient, known for mining, one of the most lovely places in the world, but it's got a lot of literary and pop culture tie too. The Merlin legend is from Tintagel down in Cornwall. Doc Martin was filmed in a town in Cornwall, still is. Daphne du Maurier was based in Loo, and I get to use her to talk about pirates, smugglers, and wreckers. A lot of piracy going on down there. It's beautiful. Poldark was filmed and written in Cornwall, and so I used the Aidan Turner rating system for the beaches where they filmed. How beautiful are they? So coming up for Women's History Month, a nice one, and the Downton Abbey film is coming out March 18th. I talk about American heiresses who married into the British aristocracy, informed partly by my trip to Diana's ancestral home, where I found out about her American great-grandmother and the fact if you ask for concessions in the UK, you will not be handed a hot dog. More on that if you see the talk. So populated largely with my vacation pictures of beautiful places. And so is this one, Mary Anning, the world's first female paleontologist, also great for women's history. Also, our tour was based on my tour, and that is to Lyme Regis on the Jurassic Coast, which is a rich fossil hunter and dealer haven, known for ammonite, that lovely swirly fossil, but she had a very compelling personal story and a kind of a sad one, but she advanced paleontology in innumerable ways due to her very keen eye and what she found. So we discussed that. Tea is a sordid topic, actually, if you didn't know. Lots of espionage. So British culture flows with tea. Really, it lubricates everything. So you can still see that if you visit the Strand in London. You see the Twinings tea shop. And I used to walk by that all the time during study abroad. But little do you know, they were drug running in the UK to get their tea, and the man that stopped that had to smuggle tea out of China and into India to create plantations to feed the nation's need for tea. So I was looking for my next talk topic, and I stumbled upon it 3 weeks ago. A man that we used to eat dinner with in England was in international news, and he was on a walk in COVID with his family, and on his dad's farm he found some strange pottery shards. Well, fast forward to archaeology descends. They have found one of the most beautifully, perfectly preserved floors of a Roman villa ever in Europe on his dad's land. And I'm afraid to say, in a great way, this happens all the time. Not this particularly, but Viking Saxon hoards and Roman baths that are just underfoot. School children who are metal detecting and happen upon stashes of coins. And they found Richard III under the car park at Tesco a few years back. That's a grocery store. So that will be available in April. So I will tell you, here's my little virtual business card coming up with my contact details. My website is called teawithclaire.com. Events is the page that I list out all my talks. You can read all the descriptions. And if you want to contact me, there are my details, my email address. My presentations last about an hour, depending on questions. And most clients spend about $200, and that can vary depending on the rights they purchase. So I'm willing to work with you if you are a library of modest means. And I will come back to you, and hopefully something might have intrigued you. So thank you, Laura, and back to you.
Thank you so much, Claire. You did a great job at reminding us that we should share our price structure with our libraries and other public institutions that are listening. So thank you, Claire. So just as a quick thing, because I forgot to do this, my pricing for the shows that I told you about just a few minutes ago, I asked $250 if it's going to be a virtual program. If, as I mentioned, I could host things for you on my Zoom license. If you want me to do that, that's an additional $25. If you want me in person, I ask $400 plus any travel fees that I incur with that. So those are my pricings. Thank you very much, Claire, for all of that information. So now we are going to hear from Laura Rocklin. So let me click some buttons here and make sure that we can see Laura. Laura Rocklin. Okay, there we go. Thank you very much. So Laura Rocklin is an actor, writer, and first-person historical interpreter based in Boston. She has performed with regional theater companies across the country and has presented her living history performances for groups on both sides of the Atlantic. Laura is a museum interpreter at the Paul Revere House Museum, an acting troupe member with History at Play, and an associate company member at the Chesapeake Shakespeare Company. She holds an MFA in creative writing from Emerson College and an MFA from the Shakespeare Theater Company's Academy for Classical Acting at the George Washington University. This morning, she will share a brief section from her Jane Austen program, Who Dares to be an Authoress, and then speak briefly about the other presentations she offers. Welcome, Miss Austen.
I am all amazement. I, Jane Austen, the daughter of an obscure country parson, have just returned from a visit to Carlton House, well, the Prince Regent's London residence. Although house seems a somewhat inappropriate title for a place that has been quite aptly described as not inferior to the French palace of Versailles. I must admit to feeling somewhat overwhelmed by such a display of grandeur, growing up as I did in the unostentatious surroundings of a quiet Hampshire village. Well, I was never so surprised in my life as I was to discover one morning that no less important personage than the Prince Regent's librarian, the Reverend Mr. Clark, had arrived at my brother Henry's home in London to call upon me. Well, imagine my astonishment when this formidable personage imparted his even more formidable message that His Royal Highness is such a great admirer of your little books, and particularly of Pride and Prejudice, that he wishes to extend to you an invitation to visit his official residence. Well, the visit to the place itself was most interesting. Among the many flattering attentions I received from the Reverend Mr. Clark at Carlton House was the information of my being at liberty to dedicate your future work to His Royal Highness without the necessity of any further solicitation on your part. Well, therefore, as my Emma is now nearing the time of her publication, she shall have the dubious honour of being embellished with the name of the Regent, and my publisher, Mr. Murray, shall send an advanced copy to Mr. Clark to grace the library shelves at Carlton House. I really must wonder if His Royal Highness knows how very insignificant a lady he has honoured with these attentions. I believe I may boast myself to be, with all possible vanity, the most unlearned and uninformed female who ever dared to be an authoress. Well, I was born in rural Hampshire on the 16th of December in 1775 in the rectory at Steventon, where my father, the Reverend George Austen, was then the incumbent of the medieval stone church of St. Nicholas. Well, he was what we then called a pluralist, meaning he held more than one living at the same time, being simultaneously the rector of Steventon and of the neighbouring parish of Dean, for which work he was paid the adequate, if not lavish, sum of £210 a year. We also had income, of course, from the sale of our farm produce and from the young men who boarded with our family while studying with my father. My mother, Cassandra Austen, was a well-educated woman with a talent for improvising occasional verse. and she early on instilled a love of literature into me and in my brothers and sisters. Well, there were 8 of us little Austens: James, George, Edward, Henry, Charles, Francis, Cassandra, and me. We were all of us a close family, but my beautiful Cassandra and I were inseparable. Indeed, my mother used to say that if Jane were going to have her head cut off, Cassandra would insist on sharing her fate. And I believe she was quite right with that assessment. Both of our parents encouraged all of us little Austens to read widely of worthwhile literature, particularly Shakespeare, Johnson, and Milton, with which our rectory library was well stocked. We were also known to dabble in the mere trash of the common circulating libraries, such delicious frivolities as the Gothic novels of Mrs. Radcliffe. Well, I did my best as a girl to make my dear parents proud, but I fear that pictures of perfection make me sick and wicked. And there were times when I was tempted to rebel against the docile behavior expected of a clergyman's daughter. I recall one long summer afternoon when I was not yet 13, and I could not resist the temptation to make a few facetious entries in the parish register at Steventon Church. I recorded, among other things, the reading of the banns of marriage between Mr. Henry Frederick Howard Fitzwilliam of London and Miss Jane Austen of Steventon. Our names do sound well together, do they not? Well, you may recognize the name of my fictitious husband, the names of several of the future heroes of my novels: Henry Tilney, Frederick Wentworth, and of course, Fitzwilliam Darcy. It was also around this time that, with the encouragement of my brothers, James and Edward, who were then studying at Oxford, I began to try my hand at the composition of fiction. Well, I started writing a few short tales and was successful enough with one entitled Love and Friendship that became a particular favorite with my family, that I proceeded to produce a prodigious number of stories between the time I turned 13 and my 18th birthday. Indeed, enough to thrill 3 well-appointed volumes. Certainly, the life familiar to me has never ceased to spark my imagination to frame tales. So hello, I'm Laura Rocklin. I wanted to share a snippet with you from one of my programs this morning. In addition to Jane Austen, I also portray First Ladies, Louisa Kathryn Adams and Dolly Madison, author Charlotte Bronte, and pioneer female photographer and wife of Henry Adams, Marion Clover Adams. Most of my programs run for 30 minutes to 45 minutes, and then I leave as much time as possible at the end for questions. First in character as the historical figure, and then out of character as Laura, the researcher, actress, and author. Most of my programs, I typically charge $250 for a Zoom performance, $500 for in-person. If you want to discuss those numbers with me, feel free to reach out to me personally. I also wanted to mention that if there is a lady connected to the organization you work with or your town who you'd like to see a program developed about, I'm always excited to start research on new figures and would also be delighted to discuss that with you. You can find my contact information on my website, which is very straightforward, www.laurarocklin.com. Thank you so much for your time and attention this morning, and I will hope to have the possibility of working with you.
Thank you very much, Laura Rocklin, and of course, Miss Austen. So we are going to hear from the third Laura today. Yes, indeed, you didn't know it was going to be the Laura show. We are going to hear from Laura Youngblood. Let me just click the appropriate buttons. Here we are. So Laura Youngblood has been a yoga practitioner since 2014 and uses her insight to help others. She discovered that teaching yoga was a way to link and apply allopathic and holistic modalities to a varied clientele. Laura connects Western and Eastern modalities by offering mindful movement and teaching breath control to her students. Drawing from her education of anatomy and kinesiology, Laura intuitively helps each student find proper alignment and ease within the posture. Laura is a knowledgeable and compassionate instructor who offers her students a joyful and empowering experience. If you are if you're sitting in your office and you're trying to do 3 things at once, just take a couple minutes and pause and focus on what Laura's going to show us today.
Thank you so much, Laura. My target audience is those who want to explore the sensation and emotions in the subtle actions and responses to daily life, hopefully to navigate confidently through the muddling. The external world is what is taking place all around us. This is the world we see, hear, smell, taste, and touch. The world you and I observe and hopefully have mutual perceptions. The internal world is the world taking place within. It is the feelings, past experiences, and even future anxieties associated with the external senses. This is the space where, if we were to describe into a little bit more detail, sensations and emotional connections, it may not be mutual. It could be understood. We each are unique in who we are, that a shared external experience is not a shared internal experience. In my years as a massage therapist, registered nurse, and registered yoga teacher, one of the biggest challenges in helping a client, patient, or student is understanding how they feel in their body, the effects of their daily life, and what it is they want. Hint: most people want to feel empowered to help themselves. There seems to be this gray space between the internal and external, and describing the personal perception to be better understood by others. Most people have an internal awareness which can be skewed when communicating with the world. It is very frustrating for me when my words and actions aren't aligning with my thoughts. And this can lead to disruptive distraction of searching for the answers externally, when really I know what I want to say or do. I just need the tools to clarify. This is not a practice of big movements, mental exercises to distract the mind, and it's not heavily guided. It is facilitated for personal exploration. I want to be careful not to imply. I am a tether to allow you to go within, but not drift and wander in wanderless thoughts. So let's start with the meditation, acknowledging the thoughts, the basic, the good, the bad, the positive, the negative. Take it to a next step and add emotion and sensation. Then add the breath, the intake and the output. How are you taking in your breath and releasing? This can be a metaphor as well. Are you taking enough of what you need and releasing the things of which aren't beneficial? But let's not get too meta here. Are you taking in enough oxygen to feed your tissues and then releasing the carbon dioxide to make space in the lungs for a bigger breath? Physical movement and application. Can you find comfort and ease going about in this world, including connection and movement, which brings awareness to areas in where there's great dis-ease or hesitation? I use yoga, tapping, meridian tracing, and self-massage techniques to bring awareness. My goal is to help you engage within. There's a Dalai Lama quote which goes, "You can't always pursue happiness. Sometimes you have to pause and let it catch up." Within these moments of self-awareness, reflection, and introspection, we give ourselves a chance to stop chasing and be. I hope you are able to reflect on the rushing moments of life, which can be muddled with a lot of chaos. I hope you are able to confidently convey personal experiences in your unique way, which can be shared with others. Now let's give it a try. I want you to come into a comfortable seated position and place the arms down to the side. Just shake them and then let them be. And then together we'll take 3 deep breaths in. So take a transitional breath now. And then we'll take a nice deep inhale in through the nose. And exhale, whether out through the nose or out through the mouth. Inhale in. Exhale out. And now it's your choice to close your eyes or have a soft gaze. Take a nice deep inhale in. And exhale out. Now I want you to start thinking of something which makes you happy. Take a big breath in. Slow, steady exhale. Do one more cycle and don't rush this. Inhale in and exhale. Now with your arms down to the side, make some circles with the wrist. And then reverse direction. And then bring the arms up overhead and cross the right arm in front of the left. Bring the arms down and cross the left arm over the right. This time, as you inhale, bring the arms up, right arm in front of left. Exhale, arms come down. One more time, left arm in front of the right and down. And then bring the arms out to a T. Reach the fingertips away. Nice full inhale in. And then bend the elbows, look on up as you exhale. Now return back to that happy thought. Inhale in. Exhale. Stay here just another breath more. It's a little vulnerable, so stay with the happy thought. Inhale in. And exhale. And then I want you to reach the arms up overhead and then bring them down to your side. You can bring them down to the side, or this time let them rest into your lap. And then I want you to take a nice full inhale in, keeping with that thought. And exhale out. Give yourself 2 more breaths just to feel the sensations. Where are you feeling the energy build up? Maybe where do you feel good about having some blood flow? Exhale. 1 more breath here. And exhale. Thank you so much for sharing your practice with me. I am available to be contacted on my website at laurayoungblood.com. I'm available for various time frames, and we can discuss series. I'm also available for a one-time event. My rate usually is about $70 to $100 an hour, and currently I am online only. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laura. So one thing that I wanted to mention to folks is that even though Laura gave us just a hint of what she can offer with meditation and such, of course, she offers wonderful yoga classes, and which she does on a weekly basis. So once again, if you'd like to do a little test before you decide to hire, you can follow the link to her website and see the weekly yoga classes that she offers to get a sense of what she does. Some of you might already have regular yoga classes scheduled, but please consider contacting Laura Youngblood for virtual classes during the winter months when it's much more comfortable to stay inside at your home rather than have your patrons and everything go outside in the cold. And for those of you who haven't been hosting yoga or meditation classes before, perhaps you museums and historical societies that are with us today, please consider contacting Laura by offering this type of program to your patrons which admittedly doesn't have a historical education focus. You will still be connecting with your museum members or your patrons throughout the winter months. And I'll tell you right now, it'll set you aside, it'll set you apart from the other historical societies or museums in your area because you're offering something unique. So keep that in mind too. Okay, so we are going to transition to our next speaker. Our next speaker is RJ Lindsay, and we will now take you to Living History Theater with RJ Lindsay.
This is R.J. Lindsay. I'm a member of Screen Actors Guild, AFTRA, and Actors Equity. I have 15 American history programs from 1776 to 1945. 3 other of these characters would like to speak to you right now. This is Ptah, the creator god. He created the world and all the other gods. It's part of my 1-hour program, The Gold of Tutankhamun. I talk about my translating Egyptian hieroglyphs in many temples, the 6-year quest of Howard Carter to find King Tut's tomb, and why for 3,000 years it remained hidden. I also have many photographs of the artifacts here that we found, and their cultural significance, and any myths attached to them. Oh, I also mention the curse of King Tut. From my almanac, a wise saying for today. Keep your eyes wide open before marriage and half shut afterwards. I have a 1-hour program for an interested group. After 1 hour, I require medicinal wine. Permit me to read something from John Adams. He wrote this: "The history of our revolution will be one continual lie from one end to the other. The essence of the whole will be that Dr. Franklin's electric rod smote the earth and out sprang General Washington. Then Franklin electrified him, and thenceforth these two conducted all the policy, negotiations, and war. The General and I did it. My story begins in my youth, where I learned much about human nature, especially after I was marooned in London at age 18 by the lying governor of Pennsylvania. Then I speak of my inventions, on to, as a Pennsylvania representative to the inept British Empire, which transformed me from a British Empire man to a revolutionary, and then to my ambassadorship to France to convince them to join our cause, while being irritated by spies, secret codes, and John Adams. Well, off to Congress. No, off to the tavern. I wanted to make photography as easy to use as a pencil. No more developing tanks, trays, jugs of chemicals. No more glass plate holders in the back of cameras. No more glass plates. We went from this to this. You pull the string, winds the spring for the shutter. Aim, press the button, snapshot. You send this back to the factory. They develop, print, and reload, and send it back to you. That's why our slogan is, you press the button, we do the rest. But it had drawbacks. The string could break. It was expensive. And while it's at the factory, how can you take more snapshots? Now the camera that changed photography in the world. The Eastman Kodak Brownie. No string, lightweight, inexpensive. Now anyone can take a photograph. Even children. Anyone can take a photograph. My program is 1 hour long. Anything longer requires development. I begin with my youth, 3 events that changed my life. Then the founding and rise of the Kodak Company, and many photographs and demonstrations of distinctive Kodak cameras. Photography brings the world to you. Herbert Ponting, pictures in Antarctica. Bernice Palmer, Brownie snapshots, survivors from the Titanic. And Dr. James Breasted in Egypt. You are there. Oh, hold it. I think you're going to like this picture. There you are, Laura.
Thank you very much, RJ. And as I've put in the chat, RJ's website there, you can see more details on, as he mentioned, the multiple different characters that he portrays. And so RJ, folks can contact you if they have specific questions about pricing or scheduling.
Oh, yes, rjlindsay.com. I give them a special $200 price, marked way down from the normal in-person. I have found it very nice not to have to travel anywhere during this pandemic, you know?
Yes.
So I'm very available for Zoom programs virtually anywhere you want. Many of the programs are keynote, maps, diagrams, photographs to assist the storyline. For example, Charles Darwin's voyage, where he went, what he saw, the Titanic, its building, and the interiors, and its voyage, his ill-fated voyage. Now, the only two programs that do not have keynote is Abraham Lincoln and Franklin Roosevelt. Presidents don't think they need any assistance. So they're all available. They're on the website, pictures on the first page of the characters, and summaries on the second page. And any questions? There we are, rjlindsay.com. It'll pop up Living History Theater, and you're set to go.
Thank you so much, RJ. So let's see here. We are going to hear next from Robert Kaplafka. Robert, if you want to start your video. There we go.
All right,
And
I'm unmuted now.
so thank you. So Robert Kaplafka is proud to portray one of his ancestors, Mr. Kirk. Robert, who is originally from North Carolina, has been involved in reenacting since he was an infant.
All right, well, thank you very much for hosting this today, Laura. I'm going to get started by sharing a short video. Well, hello. I want to thank you all for coming out to hear what I have to say. My name is William Irving Kirk, but you can call me Uncle. Everybody does. Now, when folks first started calling me Uncle Bill, they meant that uncle as a term of derision. Uncle, like the good old house slave. Uncle and aunt. Words used to describe Black folks who know their place. Well, folks who use those words in that way are speaking a truth they do not see, but a truth nonetheless. Uncle means brother of my parent. Auntie, sister of the same. Brother, yes. Sister, yes. We are all brothers and sisters in this life, and I will bear that uncle as a title. The way an Englishman might bear the title sir, for I can see the truth in that word. Now I'm a preacher, at least I used to be. Don't really know what I am now. But let me rephrase that. I don't know what I'm going to be doing for a living, but I do know what I am. And what I am is a truth seeker and a truth speaker. And by that I mean that I am dedicating my life to seeking out the truth and then speaking that truth to folks like you. Now, the other side of that coin is that when I see a lie, I haul it out for everyone to see and I call it a lie. Now, there's a particular truth I'd like to tell you folks about today. You see, my superiors, they sent me out to preach to the slave folks, try to save their souls. That sounds like good work. It sounds like a good thing to do. But they also wanted me to preach to them to be content with their lot in life, that it was their place to be slaves. At first I thought, as I've done my whole life since I was a child, that I will do as my elders and my betters tell me. Doing what your elders and your betters tell you to do will serve you well your whole life, mostly. But sometimes it's not quite that simple. Let me tell you what happened to me. I was walking along, going to visit a plantation. And on this plantation lived a great many slaves. And I was preached to them. I was walking down the road, and I looked out in the field. There were slaves out there working in that field. As I drew closer, one of the slaves stopped what he was doing, wiped the sweat from his brow, and looked over at another slave and smiled. And then he went back to his work. And in that small gesture, I saw the truth. There wasn't a slave out there in that field. There weren't any slaves out there in that field. That was a man smiling at the woman he loved. Out there in that field, there were men, women, and children, same as you and me, held in bondage by some other man. This is not their intended condition on this earth. No man, no woman, no child can rightfully be held by any earthly master. Slavery is a lie.
Okay, that's a little clip from my presentation as my ancestor, William Irving Kirk. And I'll tell you briefly about a completely different type of program that I offer, which is about bicycles. I've been doing this a lot since the pandemic started. Bicycling is a great activity to participate in during all of this because it's really easy to be socially distanced and it's good for your health. And my programs, I do 3 basic bicycle programs: waking up your bike for spring, putting your bike to bed for winter, and keeping your bike rolling for the summer. And all 3 of those programs cover a lot of the same information, but it's basic bicycle maintenance and safety, the things you need to do to keep your bicycle working properly and working safely. And once again, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. Thank you, Laura, for hosting this showcase. And if you want any more information about any of the programs that we do, please feel free to contact us. And I will turn it back to Laura.
Thank you, Robert. Would you like to remind everyone what you charge for these virtual presentations that you offer, admittedly two very different types of presentations?
Yes. Yes, two very different types of presentations. And my fees start $150 to $200, depending on the type of program. I can customize the programs for your particular library or venue. And I am doing almost exclusively virtual programming now. With the pandemic and everything, it makes things very difficult. I have done some in-person things at outdoor events, but the $200 range is where I start. And give me a call to give you a specific quote on your particular needs. Give me an email, I should say.
Thank you very much, Robert. So next, we are going to hear from William Anderson. So let's see here. Are you able to unmute yourself? There you go.
We're here.
Welcome. Okay, so I'm going to help Mr. Anderson by sharing my screen. Just a moment. Okay, so William Anderson is an author and historian who has published 30 nonfiction books for children and adults. He specializes in biographies and historical subjects. His titles include Laura Ingalls Wilder, a biography, River Boy, the story of Mark Twain, The World of the Von Trapp Family, and M is for Mount Rushmore. Mr. Anderson was the technical advisor and appeared on this year's PBS American Masters documentary, Laura Ingalls Wilder, Prairie to Page. So here we are. Thank you for being with us, Mr. Anderson.
Well, thank you, Laura. I actually started as a historian and a person fascinated in American studies, American history, culture, as a second grader when I picked up a book on Abraham Lincoln and became fascinated in his life. And later on in graduate school, I began to do magazine articles, wide gamut of topics, many of them travel, historical, interviews, and so on. So that was the beginning of my writing career, is working for about 100 different magazines through graduate school, which I continued on. And many of those magazine articles morphed into full-length books.
Excellent. Do I remember correctly that you, your first publication was when you were 12 years old?
A little older, Laura. I was 14.
I'm so sorry.
That's quite an interesting story. I mentioned the Lincoln fascination. Well, in third grade, I was one of millions of American kids that were exposed to the American frontier through Laura Ingalls Wilder's Little House series. And our third grade teacher immersed us in those books. I became fascinated with the American West, and particularly this family's journey through the heartland of America as they sought a productive homestead, which they finally found in Dakota Territory. And when those books ended in the classroom, I had a big question. What happened next to these pioneers? Because they were real people. These were true stories based on Wilder's memories. And I did some preliminary research. My parents were great in indulging my interest in history, and we made many, many side trips on vacations to historical places. One of them was the Laura Ingalls Wilder Home and Museum in Mansfield, Missouri. And the curators there knew who I was. We'd corresponded. And they said to me on that visit, would you please compile a small publication, a pamphlet, with all the dates, the names, and the after story of these people, because our tourists are fascinated with the same questions you already answered. And that was the beginning of my publishing. I did a small booklet, which sold for $1 a copy, and helped to fund some of the restoration at the Wilder home. And from that point on, I was asked to write, to speak, and I had the world's greatest summer college job. I worked for the Ingalls home site in DeSmet, South Dakota. We had loads of tourists. I gave tours, I did research, I collected oral history, and that segued into a series of books that I did on Wilder for her publisher, HarperCollins. And that fascination still goes on in America and overseas with this Ingalls family's journeys through the Midwest.
Excellent. That does sound like an amazing summer job. So tell me about how you happened to write about the Von Trapp family of the Sound of Music fame.
Well, as a history instructor, of course, I specialized in World War II. And interestingly enough, my students were very fascinated in that war. Many of them had grandfathers, great-grandfathers who served in the war. We had them visit class, for instance. And of course, World War II and the Von Trapp family are synonymous because they had to escape from their native Austria and come to America for their personal safety, 1939. And I was interested in their story because as a young person, my family visited the Trapp Family Lodge in Stowe, Vermont. We met members of the family, and I thought their immigration story was so fascinating, and the cultural exchange that they, as Austrian musicians, gave to America, a typical immigrant story. And I did The World of the Von Trapp Family, that interestingly enough was published in Japan originally. And V is for Von Trapp is one of Sleeping Bear Press's rhyming alphabet books. So this is the Cliff Notes version for kids of the longer book, The World of the Von Trapp Family, that was just released this year.
Excellent. So, so this is another image from the World of the Von Trapp Family. Tell me about the presentations that you offer for the for various libraries or museums who might be listening in.
Well, obviously, I've done many presentations about a variety of topics, but the two I'm focusing on today are the most popular and the most requested: The World of the Von Trapp Family. And because of the great fame in the movie Sound of Music, I like to focus on the true story and the motion picture story and their differences and likenesses. And also another very popular program that I'm asked to do is Laura Ingalls Wilder and the Little House Books. And I talk about my research, the places that people can visit, the historic home sites, and how this Missouri farm woman catapulted from the hen house to the publishing house, writing these classic books when she was in her 60s and 70s.
That is such a good phrase. Well, thank you folks for listening in, and thank you very much, Mr. Anderson, for joining us today. Mr. Anderson's website is williamandersonbooks.com. We apologize for the typo on this slide.
Thanks.
And the link to his website will be in the chat feature. And of course, everyone listening will be emailed that as well. So yeah, thank you, Mr. Anderson, for joining us. And
Thank you.
we are going to get ready for our next speaker, who is going to be Kathryn Harris. So Kathryn, I am going to click a couple buttons. Where did you go? You can unmute yourself, and I want to, sorry here, folks. I want to have you focused on, here we go. Well, I'll figure out how to spotlight her in just a moment. But Kathryn, can you, can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent, excellent. Here we go. Here we go. Now I can spotlight you. There we go. So I'm going to bring up some slides here, Kathryn, and then we are going to get started. So Kathryn M. Harris is the first woman and the first African American to serve as the president of the Abraham Lincoln Association since its inception in 1909. Harris served in this capacity from February 2016 to February 2018. She retired in 2015 as the Library Services Director of the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library, formerly the Illinois State Historical Library, after more than 25 years of service. Harris presents one-woman, first-person performances which honor 4 historic 19th century African-American women, as well as some lectures on historic topics. So help me welcome our final speaker today, Kathryn. Thank you very much for being with us.
And I thank you very much for this opportunity today. And
Yeah.
I'm so glad to be here. Actually, I will start with my most favorite presentation, and that is Harriet Tubman, who was the Underground Railroad conductor that most everybody has heard of. The Underground Railroad was illegal and secret, and neither was it a railroad, nor was it underground. And those are things that I have to often state to audiences, both adult and children. I usually give this presentation to school groups or church groups or social groups, but and I will present it to anyone pretty much who asks. My presentation is about 30 minutes, 25 minutes, and then time for question and answer period. And there are always lots of questions, and I always try to have lots of answers. The question and answer period is indeed in character, and if there's a question asked to which I cannot answer, I come up with something quick to say, and then when I come out of character, I will explain why I could not answer that. One of the most frequent questions that I get is, when did I die? And my answer to that question is, do I look like I'm dead? I'm not dead. I'm standing right here in front of you. And audiences usually get a kick out of that. So when I come out of character, I do talk about Harriet's life past being the conductor, which is mostly what she's known for, but she was also a scout, a spy, and a nurse for the Union Army. Next slide. Another portrayal that I do is of Jarena Lee. Jarena Lee was the first female preacher in the African Methodist Episcopal Church, the AME Church. Our church was founded in 1789 in Philadelphia, and the church is called Mother Bethel. Mother Bethel Church was indeed a stop on the Underground Railroad, in fact. And Jarena Lee got permission to preach, which was not something that was done back in her day very much, because women were not allowed to preach. But as Jarena said, who brought the good news of Jesus's resurrection? Was it not a woman? And indeed it was. And so I tell her story. She spoke and preached from Philadelphia to Western Ohio, and she just kind of disappeared. No one knows when she died or where she was buried. When I present as Jarena, I read her remarks because she left a book entitled The Religious Experiences of Jarena Lee. So I present that in a reading format, and people are usually quite interested in her. She's a very little known woman outside of the AME Church. Next slide, please. Phoebe Florville. Probably many of our listeners today have heard of William Florville. He was called Billy the Barber, and he was Mr. Lincoln's friend and confidant. Phoebe Florville was his wife. She was the daughter of her master, who who came from Barron County, Kentucky, and settled here in Springfield. And Phoebe met up with William Florville when William Florville relocated from New Salem to Springfield. Phoebe had, she and William had 5 children. And I think that Phoebe, there are no images of her. There is an image of William Florville, but there are none of Phoebe. But Phoebe does have a very unique grave marker, and she is buried in Oak Ridge Cemetery here in Springfield. Her husband, Billy, his being a Catholic, he is buried in the adjacent Catholic cemetery, Calvary Cemetery. Next slide. Elizabeth Keckley. Elizabeth Keckley was the seamstress and confidant of First Lady Mary Lincoln. Now, I am not near as tall or statuesque as Elizabeth Keckley was, but, and neither can I sew as Kathryn Harris, but Mrs. Lincoln and Lizzie, as she very fondly called her, were very good friends and had almost a lifelong relationship until Robert inserted himself. On the night of the assassination, for instance, Lizzie was in her apartment. She kept an apartment away from the White House, but she also had a room, an apartment in the White House. But the particular night of April 14th, when the assassination occurred and Mr. Lincoln died the next day, Lizzie was at her own apartment. But when she heard the news about the president being shot, she rushed to the White House. She was turned away, first of all, because she was a Black woman, and how dare she come to the White House in the first place, even though Mr. Lincoln had received other African Americans, including Frederick Douglass and Sojourner Truth. But Lizzie was she was a friend and confidant and helped with the children. And for example, when Willie was ill, she sat with him while they had a levee downstairs. But the next day, when Lizzie did have entree to the house, to the White House, Mrs. Lincoln said, "Where were you last night, Lizzie? I needed you." And she told her that she was not allowed to come in, and the usher did not know her. And so Mrs. Lincoln, being the way she was, he was summarily dismissed. And so one of the things that Elizabeth Keckley did was to, she made a quilt of the remnants of the fabrics that, of the clothes she made for Mary. And she hoped to deliver that to Robert and his family. But when her funeral was here at First Presbyterian here in Springfield, Lizzie was not allowed to come in. So the quilt and its whereabouts, don't really know the rest of that story. Next slide.
So yeah, Kathryn, I'll just have you talk briefly about the 2 historic lectures that you offer to folks as well.
Right. I'll talk about the 1908 Springfield race riot that people may be aware of it, but or may not. It was one of the most vicious race riots in the North. And it was called a shameful affair because it took place right here in Mr. Lincoln's home, the home of the great emancipator. There were 2 people lynched. There were the Levee district and the Badlands district, which was where the African Americans lived, was pretty much destroyed. And many people fled Springfield, many Blacks, and never to return again. It was indeed a shameful affair. The good thing that came out of it, however, was it was the catalyst for the formation of the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, which was founded in 1909. It was not founded in Springfield, but that was the race riot here was the, quote, straw that broke the camel's back. Next slide, please. And finally, I do a presentation on the colored section of Oak Ridge Cemetery. Oak Ridge Cemetery is the second most visited cemetery in the nation. Only Arlington has more visitors. And the colored section of the Springfield, and it is called the colored section of Oak Ridge because it is in the historic part of the cemetery, and buried there are many folks who knew Abraham Lincoln, including William Dunnigan, who was a victim of the 1908 race riot. William Dunnigan made boots for Mr. Lincoln because he was a cobbler. There are others who are buried there, including Miss Jane Pelham. Jane Pelham was probably the first person to be buried in this section of Oak Ridge Cemetery. The two ministers who were in Mr. Lincoln's procession, one who led his horse called Old Bob, Reverend Brown is buried there, as well as Reverend Trevant. They're both buried in Oak Ridge. And there are many, many stories of people who are buried in Oak Ridge in the historic part of the cemetery that are wonderful stories to learn about and to do research on. Next slide. And you may get in touch with me at my email address that is shown here for my presentation of Harriet and Elizabeth Keckley and Jarena and the other character that I present. I charge a very minimal fee of $50 to $75, and then travel expenses. And depending on how far it is, it may be necessary to have an overnight stay. Right now, I am mostly doing virtual performances because of COVID. But one of these days, this too shall pass, and I'll be back on the road in person. Thank you so much, Laura.
You are welcome. Thank you, Kathryn.
Laura,
So, yes.
may I inject just a comment Kathryn might be interested in?
Yes, go ahead, RJ.
Kathryn, George Eastman of Kodak,
Mhm.
his family was on the Underground Railroad from Rochester, New York to Toronto, Canada.
Wow. Uh-huh.
And he grew up with that in his background. And so he read Booker Washington's autobiography and realized that Black education was not in terrible shape. And so he donated a lot of money to the Tuskegee Institute to be sure they had the proper buildings to be able to educate.
Well, thank you very much for that tidbit of information.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Well, isn't it amazing what you can learn just from having a conversation? So folks who are listening, who are still here, thanks so much for continuing to be with us for an hour and 20 minutes. You are welcome to put any questions that you have for any of our speakers in the chat, and we will take the time to answer anything. If you have to get going for the rest of your day, go ahead. We won't take it personally. The last thing that I'm going to put in the chat is the link where all of our presenters' contact information is listed. Go to that website, historicalvoices.info. /virtual presenter showcase. It's right there in the chat. Everyone is going to be emailed a recording of this presentation and also all of these links. If I can figure out how to do it, I'll list all of the questions, and comments in the chat. But really, if you have any questions, if you want some clarification from any of our speakers, please do so. Just type them into the chat and we'll ask. Let's see. I want to look at my notes. Did we have a question? There was the question earlier about the list of presenters and their contact info. So I put that there. And thank you very much for your comments in the chat. I'm so glad that people have enjoyed this. It was a crazy idea that I had. And so I'm so glad. Okay, Kathryn, if you could please repeat your pricing. We've got that question here. Kathryn, if you could repeat that.
My pricing is $50 to $75 for like an hour presentation. And then depending upon how far away it is, round trip travel, and if necessary, an overnight stay in a hotel.
Thank you, Kathryn. Here's another question. Could each presenter tell us their most well-attended lectures or which topic does particularly well? I will start us off by saying, oh my goodness. I will say that my Elizabeth Cady Stanton, I believe, has done pretty well. The attendance, I think, waxes and wanes with the hosting society, the hosting organizations, you know, what their marketing things were. But I would say my Elizabeth Cady Stanton or my History of the Hershey Chocolate Company lecture. That is, chocolate's popular with everyone. So Claire, what answer would you give to that question?
I will reiterate what you said, and I found that depending on the demographic of the library that hired me and how well advertised the event is can affect things greatly. For example, my all-time record-setting figure in a Zoom is 104, and that was for Harry Potter. However, my all-time lowest record setting was also for Harry Potter. So I don't know. It's so unpredictable. People love to bake. So I do, especially in the winter months, that's very popular. But I kind of, you know, I offer for all seasons and interests. So it's quite difficult. It depends. It depends. I can't give you a firm, stalwart answer. The ones that are the most well attended, frankly, are the oldest, and the ones that are newer have had fewer people attend, but then they're booking too. So it's really the booking librarian knows their clientele best, I think.
Thank you, Claire. Laura Rocklin, what answer would you give?
Yes, well, I would say that, you know, right now, Jane Austen is just incredibly popular. She is having her moment in the sun these days, with all sorts of film adaptations coming out and new books and retellings and reimaginings. So she has been very popular. I'd say that my Charlotte Bronte program is a close second because I've published the most academic work on Charlotte. So I think my name is out there connected with her in different ways than it is to Jane. But I'd say those two are probably my top two.
Excellent, thank you. Laura Youngblood, what would you like to say about your different Zoom offerings that you give?
One my most popular Zoom offering is a modified yoga class that's offered probably once a month. It's called Hella Lazy Yoga, and basically I write a sequence in which your butt doesn't move from the mat and you get a full body yoga practice. And it's really great because if you don't feel like moving, if you don't feel like leaving your house, but you need a little bit in your practice, it's perfect.
That does sound very, very good. And of course, a very easy, perhaps even an easy starter way to introduce yoga to your patrons. RJ, what would you say that your most popular presentation is?
Well, now I haven't done as many Zoom in the last year because I was concentrating, since the pandemic couldn't go anywhere. I was concentrating on my 300-page family history going back 5 generations back to Europe of 6 family lines. I thought, well, it's about time. This 7 years has gone by. I better get this thing done. But the programs that have proved popular in April is the Titanic. All of a sudden, you'll have 3 or 4 people decide that's what they want in that particular week in April. The automobile program, the Kodak program, because Ransom Olds talks about the history of automobiles and early racing in America. And let's see, Ben Franklin has gotten in there. He had a standing room ovation when I was there. A standing room only when I was there at Freeport. That
Yeah,
one time
yeah.
when you were there. Let's see who else we got here. Put my memory.
Well, that sounds like some pretty popular shows. Thank you for sharing. I'll let Robert get a word in here on what his popular shows were.
Well, I guess it is interesting because the largest attendance I had, I want to say it was like 113 people on a Zoom presentation for one of my bicycle presentations. And I was just baffled by that because I've also had 2, for the same bicycle presentation. But the bicycle programs have been incredibly popular. My bicycle programs, it's basically something I whipped together for Laura's library. And I've just been really surprised by the amount of interest in it. But it is something that everybody can do. Everybody can get interested in is bicycling. But the bicycle programs have by far been the most popular. But once again, it's also the time of day that they're scheduled and the venue knowing their patrons' schedules and when to place the presentation in time.
Thank you, Robert. Let's see here. Bill, what would you like to share? If you can you unmute yourself? Shall I? Just a minute. I can't. Sorry, Bill, just a moment. Yeah. There we go. Are you able to unmute now? Technology is fun.
Yes.
There he is.
There we go.
Good. Well, the reason I focused today on Von Trapp and Laura Ingalls Wilder is simply because they bring in crowds. And when I was doing this live, obviously, they would like pack the lecture room. And then when I started to do some Zoom, the Troy Public Library asked for Wilder. And I was amazed there were 170 people that were watching from different parts of the US. So one library director said, "You don't talk about your latest novel because they don't write fiction. You talk about very popular people and historical figures." And I always say they draw.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And so then, Kathryn, you actually mentioned before that your most popular, most asked for program is Harriet Tubman. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. And she has been popular in person, but also she's been to Zoom. She's been on Zoom also, but for Zoom, it's mostly been for schools.
Sure.
So,
yeah.
It's been to classrooms. But one of the best attended Harriet programs was at the Fort Wayne Public Library. And there, the room was filled to overflowing. The librarian said it was the best program, the best attended program they had in a long time. So
Yeah.
I was really.
Yeah, excellent. Well, folks, if you have any more questions, please type them into the chat. I hope, well, I do appreciate the kind words that have been placed in the chat about how people appreciate the collection of speakers. And I do sincerely hope that you've got some ideas for your programming. Again, if you have just questions, put them into the chat or reach out to us individually. I've once again put the link in the chat where you can contact all of us. And And Cynthia has a question about Bill's pricing. Cynthia, I think you should contact Bill directly to discuss his pricing. I think that's what Bill would like, individual conversations with folks. So Cynthia, just reach out to Bill. His website is there again in the chat. Alyssa, you're very welcome. Cindy, you're very welcome. I'm glad that everyone could attend here today. And okay, well, if there are any other questions, we'll be around for a little bit. But if you have to get on with your day, we really do understand that. That is just fine. So I'm going to stop the recording